Hello and welcome to Hospitality Talks with me, Katy Moses, the founder and MD of KAM Media. And today I'm delighted to be joined by James Hacon, who is a founder and partner in Think Hospitality, amongst other businesses. Thank you for joining us, James.
Thanks for having me again, Katie. So it's a year on, quite crazy.
Absolutely, and that is one of the reasons why I invited you on today, is because we are exactly 1 year ago since the first hospitality talk session that was you and I looking at what might happen in this 3-month lockdown that we're going to have and then beyond. If only we knew then what we know now. So James, where have you been? I haven't seen a hell of a lot of you in the last sort of few months. What have you been up to, and why have you gone quiet?
Yeah, so it's been a pretty busy year, albeit a crazy year for me personally and professionally, really. So on a personal basis, many people will know that I had my firstborn son in January last year. So being a dad certainly has kept me busy. From a career perspective, I also took on a role working with a company called Mapal Group, who are a Spanish private equity backed hospitality technology business. And we've actually done about 3 acquisitions of other companies from that company over the past year. So that's been keeping me pretty busy too. And alongside that, I'm still involved in Think as a partner, and we've been doing lots of work, particularly with the public sector, advisory work for various government type organizations, given the current situation, and also quite a lot of developers, and still got my partners there and kind of helping out where I can alongside. And I'm still chairman of I'm Donna, and that's been the standard as everyone else has dealt with: open, close, take away, pivot again, and that whole thing. So it's been quite difficult to kind of keep any kind of public profile necessarily during this time. And my view quite strongly is if you've not got anything that's really important to say, or it's not your credentials, then stay quiet. And there's lots of other people that have picked up that opportunity and really representing the sector very well. I think our view, though, quite strongly is that, look, my background is mostly accelerating businesses and growing businesses. And of course, it's not been a time for an acceleration. It's been a time for consolidation and getting ducks and houses in order. And I think that lots of people have done that really well. I think that we recognize with the reopening and hopefully no more closures, that there'll be more of a center stage for marketing and development professionals again. And I think that we're starting to kind of get that back up and running with Restaurant Marketer and Innovator, which, as you know, Katie, you've been involved for the last few years as a joint initiative between Think Hospitality and Propel. And actually in the next few days, we'll start putting out some really interesting articles from some great leaders in this space, and that marketing development strategy space, talking about, you know, how has their role changed, what are they doing, and what's next for them. Because of course, you know, for the last year, it's been a lot about learning and development and people and operators, and of course they're the people that have already managed to get their businesses through this sector. And I think, you know, it's about getting back to driving it forward, and that's where the marketing and strategy leaders will start coming into their own again.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that, you know, there's been a very much a sort of batten down the hatches, let's get through this, and then, as you say, the pivoting and the takeaway, etc. Now it's time for us to sort of come out of the darkness and hopefully light the way with some amazing marketing, which we're already seeing. What are you seeing out there with regards to businesses getting ready for reopening? Do you think as an industry we're there and we're ready? Do you think there's more work to do?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that for the most part, people have been spending a lot of time preparing and getting ready. I think that there are some definite challenges, though. I think one of which is that after lockdown 1 and 2 and so on, I think that there to a degree there's an amount of belief and expectation that we know how to do this and we're ready. But I think one of the things that we've definitely seen under the Mapal umbrella is one of the businesses is Flow Learning, and we've spent a lot of time talking and surveying leaders, but also the end the kind of frontline team. And I think what's really clear is that this time it's going to be quite different, because actually most businesses have reduced their overall team size by about 40% over within the year. I mean, that was the number we got back from quite a big survey we completed. And I think to restart with 60% of your team, and potentially, and of course there is going to be a split here between urban venues potentially being a bit quieter this summer still, and more regional and rural and honeypot and destination venues being completely rammed. I mean, but if you consider that there will be a lot of businesses that, and I know a lot of businesses that think this summer they're going to be trading better than summer 2019, and that last summer was already big for them for the period they were open, and it's going to be even bigger. So to go from 40, 50, 60% of staffing to potentially 100 and 110%, including dealing with the issues and the impact of Brexit and lack of professionals, I think is going to be a real challenge. And I'm not sure it's particularly similar to the last, or the reopening after lockdown 1 last year, because a lot of people had fully preserved their team through furlough and were coming back with an existing team who knew their business and were ready to go. I mean, and I think at that point it was a lot about how do we trade out of COVID, and within COVID secure conditions. I think this time it's that plus how do we trade our businesses at all? How do we deliver on our guest experience? How do we actually cook the items on the menu? Like, there's a whole training and development piece. And frankly, even for people who have been open last summer and coming back, there's a huge reminder. I mean, having had sporadic work over a year, I mean, frankly, it's not going to be an easy task to come back from this and come back strong and with one big hit, right?
I agree, and I also think this is something that I've been sort of on various different webinars and having conversations with people in the industry about. Of course, the customer has fundamentally changed, and the person that was coming through your doors last year, or even in the break that we had, it is very, very different. And I think that understanding that customer is going to be a real challenge, especially when you look at sort of the marketing teams. Now, there's some great marketing out there that we've seen during, and social media has really come into its own for a lot of those kind of outlets and venues. But what do you think will have fundamentally, using that word again, changed in marketing from this pandemic for hospitality?
I think one of the things that will definitely happen is that last year and during the summer period, I think there was a national buzz and a national excitement and a national willingness to accept that things aren't going to be right and great. And I think that the big challenge we're going to have coming out of this time is, frankly, people are done. They're tired, they're done. If you rewind to last summer, we were clapping for the NHS once a week. We were, we're not doing any of those things that were nation building and all of that stuff. I mean, frankly, people are tired, grumpy, and want to get out. And my question will be whether or not they're going to, whether there's going to be quite as much acceptance of people kind of getting back up and running onto their feet and dealing with the challenges. And I think that's going to be one big impact straight away for marketers and people trying to build and maintain a reputation of their business, is going to be just positioning that effectively. And I think one business that's done really well throughout that whole period was actually McDonald's, really. I think if you I would, nobody likes admitting that they go to McDonald's, but I think given the situation of COVID, I think most of us can admit that there have been times where we've gone to McDonald's. And I think they've been very good at communicating that there will be slowness of service, that these are the issues, but it's been constant, and it's been pretty good throughout that process through signage and other things. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. I think the other thing that I think we need to be really aware of is that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, whether we liked it or not, or whether we know that consumers did, and what it did do is it spread the week, right? And I think that we recognise that with less capacity in venues, that there is a need to spread the week. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting time to consider whether people do their equivalent of what Eat Out to Help Out were doing within individual businesses to try and get that spread through to earlier in the week rather than just the big hit weekend. So I think that's going to be quite an interesting challenge to marketers too. And I think that more generally, there's also a question around how to reach those consumers and how to actually engage with them. Because I think, as you said, social's been great, but I also think that a lot of people's channels have almost gone dead for quite a long period of time because what have they had to talk about? And I think we know that algorithms within social media work effectively when you keep feeding the beast. If you stop feeding the beast and you get it back up and running again, question is, who knows what your reach is going to be? And I think that's going to be a really interesting tactical challenge as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And we as much as we have been doing everything online for the best part of the last year, people are wanting to get back out there. And how do you welcome people in it and welcome customers who may be nervous, but also excited to see you? And I think marketing is going to play a big part in that. And I think that's also about managing customer expectation. So understanding what the customer wants from you and then being able to give that to them. I want to finish on a bit of optimism. Are you optimistic for the future? And what positives do you think will have come out of this pandemic for hospitality, other than the sort of spreading the weak, as you say, which I think is something that we just have to learn as an industry?
I think there's going to be loads of positives out of this. I think that the whole hospitality into retail space has been phenomenal. Watching that take off, I think both in kind of mainstream retail into supermarkets and convenience retail. I mean, that whole area that you and your team work on so well, Katy, in terms of understanding both those sectors. I think that's been really interesting. I think that at home stuff's been interesting, and I mean, we just saw. I think Joe Fleet's gone to work with Hawksmoor full time. It was in Propel this morning, and I think that's really interesting because they're obviously doubling down on continuing to do Hawksmoor at home as an extra revenue line. I think we've seen Pizza Pilgrims double down on that as well. I heard Gavin speaking on a podcast recently, and he was saying that that there's definitely this focus of doing that well into the future. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think the next one for me is trying to recognize and leverage delivery as a whole in a much better way. I mean, particularly within the higher end venues. I remember categorically speaking to quite a lot of chefs who would have told me that they would absolutely never consider doing Deliveroo or Just Eat or anything else because it completely goes against the fabric of hospitality. It's about in my venue and so on. And I think that what we will see now is that that horse has bolted, and I think that people have now adapted, and that will continue to happen too. But I think more generally, I do feel like we're going to start seeing a willingness to pay more for an experience. And I might eat my words with this, but I do feel like people may not return to going out as much as they were before, would be my gut feeling. I think we've learnt to enjoy our time at home as much as we may not want to be trapped at home. I do feel people are now aware, understanding, and much more willing and kind of accepting of that time and valuing it. I think that we're also very much back in love with cooking. Again, we probably don't want to do it 7 nights a week, but I think that there's definitely been a love of cooking and baking and so on, which will maintain. And I think, but I think people will return out, but potentially will spend more when they do so each time. I think the big challenges are going to be, of course, inner city and urban environments. I mean, I'm Donna, the business I'm a lead investor and chairman in. We closed the Leeds City site, which is right by the train station in Leeds, very quickly, and frankly have tried to reopen it a couple of times with little success. And we're going to reopen it in April, partly thanks to Leeds City Council giving us a large space outside to be doing on-street dining, which has been good. But our business there was workers. Most of our business was 12 till 2 p.m. our business there was late night. I mean, we've got Arc Inspiration venues all around us, and Greek Street just around the corner. And for those people that know Leeds, we know that, you know, that was our busy time. And then students were the third. So given that there's not really many students back in Leeds, there's no little to no nightlife, and I mean, frankly, who knows when that's coming back in any big way at this point to the same degree. And then the workers, and it's interesting, I've seen the last few days a lot of people really focused on kind of debunking the myth that everyone's going to be working from home. But I wholeheartedly believe, and from the people that I know and some studies that I've seen suggest, you know, it's not going to be people closing offices completely, but almost certainly there's no resealing of this concept that people will want more flexibility and will be working at home more. And I
Yeah.
do think that by default that will impact city centre venues. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time. But I think optimistically, I think this summer for the most part will be quite strong. But let's hope so.
James Hacon, thank you so much for your time today and for agreeing to join me exactly a year after we first spoke, and the first hospitality talk session. And wishing you all the best for the reopening in the summer and for all the businesses that you're involved in.